good morning. I keep on thinking it's already afternoon. I think it's because we've all been waiting in so much anticipation for this particular session of this three webinar series, if I can call it that way. So colleagues, just for you to note that this is webinar 1. This will be followed by webinar 2 a little after this particular webinar, and then of course webinar 3 tomorrow morning. So delighted to see you all, and I'm so glad that everybody's joining from this point. I think this is a very important conversation that we have to have this morning. It's a long-awaited one, I must say. So thank you very much for putting this together. So Janet, when you're ready, please could you start with a welcome and perhaps just some background to this session. Colleagues, Janet van Ryn is the project manager at University South Africa. Janet, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susan, and good morning, everybody, colleagues, partners, and friends. It's wonderful to see so many of you joining us for this important conversation. So on behalf of USAF and the Research and Innovation Strategy Group, it's my pleasure to open this important two-day conversation under the theme, Who Owns Our Knowledge? Moving towards a sustainable and equitable open access system. This theme goes right to the heart of what universities stand for. It challenges us to think deeply about questions like who creates knowledge, who has access to it, and who ultimately benefits from it. And I think these questions are not just philosophical, but it's about equity, social justice, and participation in the creation and sharing of our knowledge. So open access is not just about publishing models or technology, but deeply around social justice. At USAF, we believe that the research produced by universities should serve as a public good, not sit behind paywalls or be accessible only to a few. When knowledge is open, it empowers. It empowers researchers to build on each other's work, students to learn more freely, and communities and policymakers to make informed, evidence-based decisions. Over the next 2 days, as Susan has mentioned, we'll explore what it takes to build a truly sustainable and equitable open access ecosystem. This morning, we begin with the policy and governance for open access, and then we have sustainable funding models for open access, and tomorrow we will look at stakeholder collaboration in pursuit of open access. Our hope is that by the end of these discussions, we will have a clearer collective understanding of our roles, responsibilities, and opportunities to advance open access together as a sector. I want to take this a moment to really thank our partners who, without their unwavering support, we would not have been able to do this. To the DSTI, ASAF, CHALSA, SANLIC, LIASA, NRF, the RISG, and the Open Access Advisory Committee, chaired by Prof. Jose France and supported by Dr. Harm Watts. Thank you for your continued support and commitment to the process and your leadership. So as we begin, I invite you to engage critically, to share your insights and ask the challenging questions. Susan, thank you so much for chairing this session and for being such a key player in this initiative. Susan is the director of the Scholarly Publication Unit at USAF, at ASAF, and no stranger to any of us in the sector. Very key in driving the open science agenda. So thank you so much. Enjoy the webinar series, and we hope to learn a lot from each other. Thank you, and over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Janet, for that introduction. So let's move on then to the next item. So it gives me really great pleasure then to introduce Mr. Patel. So Mr. Patel, especially for ASAF, has been known for years, but let me introduce him to you. So Mr. Patel is a public policy and strategy manager with a focus on science, technology and innovation, human capital development, inclusive development, sustainability, social and economic development, science impact and public management and governance. So Mr. Patel has been employed by the Department of Science and Technology since 2006, where he is responsible for strategic driving a portfolio of investments and policies that enable the leveraging of science, technology, and innovation So this includes investments in human capital development and knowledge production, science engagements, the basic sciences, open science, research infrastructures, and science missions. Mr. Patel, it's really my honor to actually introduce you in this particular webinar. I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to do so. So it gives me great proudness and, of course, joy to introduce you. And it's over to you, sir, for your presentation. Thank you very much. There you go. Right, and we can see your slides. If you can just take it to slide 1 and on full presentation mode, please.
Thanks, Suzanne, and the other colleagues on the platform. Good to see so many, reaching 89 at the moment, who are part of a conversation. I think the organizers have framed this as a question: who owns the knowledge? And part of it is to say, how do we move towards an open access policy? And that requires collective understanding and discussions. So I'll briefly sketch out in the South African Open Science Policy. And thanks to my colleagues, Segren Moodley and Tendeka Hallis, who's on the call. I don't think Segren's here, he's on leave, who have played an instrumental role in taking us forward in terms of the open science policy. But as I was indicating to the colleagues when I was invited, is that I will just set the scene. I'm very keen to hear the perspectives of the other participants on this program, so that this can also help inform how we proceed in terms of the open science policy. So what I will do is just to give a status of the open science policy, national open science policy, I should say. Just some background and evolution of that policy, the key policy provisions, and then home in on open access, which is a component part of the open science policy. I take note that this session is particularly focused on the open access issues, but these are located for us within the broader context of an open science policy, and then some concluding remarks. So a national policy was finalized after extensive benchmarking and taking guidance from what was happening internationally. Quite a bit was taking place, I think, in those years of 2018 to 2024. I was at an OECD meeting yesterday, and one of the comments that was made in a report that's forthcoming is that the policy attention on open science in other jurisdictions has been less so. It's declined a bit. But in South Africa, I think we're still at the stage of finalizing our policy, so there's going to be a lot more attention on this matter moving forward, including at events like Science Forum South Africa, etc. In engagements with the minister, a decision was taken to give this policy the status of a cabinet-approved policy because of its implications across the system of innovation. And there are some international engagements. These also featured, for example, open science and open access issues have featured in important forums like the G20. And so we're at the advanced stages of tabling this to cabinet. We have to get the socioeconomic assessment done, etc., etc. So we're still hopeful that within the next couple of months, at least before the start of the next financial year, this policy would be in place. So why an open science policy? An open science orientation emerged as a key requirement in the decadal plan that we finalized in 2023. And prior to that, prior to that, in the new white paper for science, technology, and innovation. Sorry, I just want to minimize this so I can see my own presentation. The decadal plan defined open science as follows. It's an approach to research based on greater access to public research data, enabled by a set of tools and platforms that we would work on. But it goes broader than access and speaks about the transdisciplinarity approach, broader collaboration in science, including the participation of non-scientists, and the use of alternative copyright tools to diffuse research results. So broad definition that includes as a central pillar to it the issue of access, but goes broader than that. And then the decadal plan included a specific intervention, a commitment to the implementation of an open science policy. And that policy, like I said, it's in the stages of being formally approved, and then the implementation will happen. Open science is an inclusive construct that combines various movements and practices, make scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and reusable, increase scientific collaborations and the sharing of information, and then open, like I said, to actors beyond this here. In essence, in framing a kind of meta discourse for this, it's actually about creating a vehicle for the democratization of knowledge. I think most people are familiar with this aspect. If you haven't been, then open science operates on the principle of being as open as possible and as closed as necessary. And as I referenced the OECD work, a lot has emerged in the last few years on exactly where is that line on the continuum, and it differs significantly from country to country. And it's something that doesn't stay fixed. As we can see in some jurisdictions, people have become more closed in terms of their science here. So we have accepted this principle as well. And therefore, over the next few years, we would need to spend time to identify the particular cases and situations where openness needs to be restricted for economic competitive or security or any other requirements. But that, like I said, will become an ongoing process of reflection and shifting the needle in terms of where it belongs. There's a considerable geopolitics that's framed around open science. It's a global issue. Most jurisdictions are speaking about this here. The key part of this slide is the UNESCO 2021 recommendation on open science, which provided a global roadmap and a shared understanding amongst its members and a commitment to open science. So those recommendations kind of address global power imbalances that favor practices that come from the global north, and parachuting of scientific enterprises and the data not even staying in the jurisdictions that it belongs to, etc. So this we remain confident that this UNESCO recommendations provides a very good roadmap for our own efforts. So on that basis, our open science policy is aligned with the UNESCO recommendations. I'm not necessarily going to that. You can read further because I want to focus on some of the access issues here. I did mention the issues around diverse knowledge systems. I think we at the early stages of really enhancing this. We've got a long and proud history. We international leaders in terms of the indigenous and local knowledge and citizen science. And this has been confirmed by many independent reports that in fact lists South Africa is one of the countries that are doing quite a lot in this space. But I still feel that there's quite a lot to do in this space here. All right, I'm not going to go into that, and I mean you can read this here. So the policy is based on these internationally agreed definitions, etc. And the intention as a policy framework is to provide guidance, particularly to publicly funded research processes, outputs, and data, and that significantly includes the higher education sector. And so the intention is that this policy will guide the development of institutional policies around open science, taking into account the national context. The policy tries to do the following, but This is the key. It's grounded in 7 policy intents that will be the focus of efforts by the DSTI, and like I said, this is the area where we would like to get more insight from people like yourself on what is it that we have to do under these 7 policy intents, where we should be focusing our attentions and priorities to. So these include aligning the policy and regulatory environment, enable open access, which is the topic for today, to the scientific literature, and working with people like ASAF, etc., to look at a whole range of instruments and arrangements that needs to be done in that instance, including collective power to secure better open access. What provisions do we put for publicly funded research to make things available? We've built infrastructures like Nikki's, etc., to assist in this regard. Which is the third point: enable access to valuable open data, facilitate the required education and skills, introduce potential incentives and rewards, build a required infrastructure, and that will remain a very important priority for ourselves, taking into account the need for significant resources to build that required infrastructure. And then a very specific focus on citizen science. So our current priorities places this open access debate within a broader ambition to open the scholarly process in its entirety, and therefore a lot of education, getting the kind of orientation correct is a big priority. Research assessment reform is high on the list of priorities for research performing and funding organization. Lots of work being done by the NRF. Our colleagues will be able to share that. And then, taking forward some of the UNESCO recommendations. Now, open access, this is something that we're just reflecting at a high level, is important for universities because it increases the global visibility and impact of your research, leading to more citations and potential collaboration, allows you to collect, preserve, and track your own public scholarly output, and then make research freely available to a wider audience, including our ambition to open up this process to others. So that's why we think it's important if it's happening. This is a crucial side. There's a number of challenges, not all of which we have kind of have effective strategies to deal with. Some we do, but your inputs would be very useful in this. We've broken it down, the challenges, into 4. There were financial. The big one is the article processing charges, funding gaps, cost complexities. In terms of the infrastructure and technology, still ongoing digital divides that exist, whether the repository and infrastructure support needs upgrading and improvement. There's a lack of skills in terms of awareness and human factors. There's low awareness of the requirements and skills gaps. And then they are resistant to change, particularly institutional change. And big challenges on the publishing and copyright angle, publisher resistance, copyright complexities, the rise of predatory publishers, etc. So each of these elements need to be kind of thought through as part of our implementation, and to look at what is it that we can do as a Department of Science and Technology to assist us. But it needs the partnership in many instances to achieve these different enablers to enhance open access. So to conclude for now, I think the opening comments highlighted that knowledge, and particularly publicly funded knowledge generation programs, means that it's a public good, and therefore should be available to all. The intention is by making it freely available, we hope to increase visibility, citation rates, collaboration, and overall global impact. And we confident that and learning from things like the COVID-19 example, that open access can facilitate innovation, collaboration, and socioeconomic development. So in summary, open science can make South African science more efficient, reliable, and responsive to societal challenges. We need to build an ecosystem in science becomes more substantiated and transparent, reproducible, effective, and cumulative. Open science aims to democratize access to knowledge, useful for training and teaching, and for broader purposes like the economy, public policy, citizens, and society as a whole, and resonates with our mantra of placing science, technology, and innovation at the center of government, industry, education, and society. Especially in this age, I see there's a lot more concerns from a policy perspective around citizens' trust in science and scientific integrity. And we think that this can open science broadly, inclusive of open access, constitutes a lever for scientific integrity and to build citizen trust in science. So I hope that was useful. The actual policy document, as soon as this is finalized by Cabinet, will be circulated and will be available on our website, etc. And we're moving into the implementation in parallel to getting approval for the policy. We are beginning to put in place the implementation building blocks, and some of that we can share in the forum and in other spaces. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you, Mr. Maftel, and thank you very much for demystifying us the open science policy. I think there has been lots of talk in the corridors. What is it about? What are the principles? Does it align with other UNESCO sort of recommendations? And if we align, how do we align? And on which aspects do we actually give prominence to? And what is the plans of the DSTI in once a policy has been approved? How do we roll it out? So I think this has really given us just sort of a taste of what is about to happen. Actually, quite a lot of exciting things in the space of open science. So thank you very much for that. Colleagues, I would like to now invite a couple of our stakeholders to give us some insights and perhaps some reactions on this presentation. Please, my request, Professor Fulufelo Netswera, who is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research at the University of Venda, to give us a university-level perspective. Prof, over to you for your response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan. Yes, yeah. I hope you can hear and also see me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Susan. Let me thank yourself for putting together this important webinar that deals with very important issues in our society as far as knowledge production is concerned. Let me also thank Imran Patel for that introductory presentation. I think it is very valuable and it gives very good insight about where we are and where we are going. There are a few points I would like to highlight in as far as knowledge production is concerned, addressing the question of whose knowledge it is and why it is important that we continue to produce knowledge and its accessibility in society. The first point I want to raise is the fundamental question about whose knowledge this is. I think knowledge production overall is about addressing the public good, whether it is being produced by private or public entities. Knowledge generally is meant for improving lives. Even if the ultimate beneficiary might be, from a financial standpoint, might be an entity, a private corporate entity, but generally the interest is to benefit society. Whose knowledge is it? I think informs the kind of knowledge that we produce. If it is knowledge that is meant for society, then indeed society benefit from that knowledge. So taxpayers should have interest in the types and forms of knowledge that are being produced, but equally the outcome of that particular knowledge. So they should dictate. How they go about that is a secondary question, but indeed they should dictate the kind of knowledge that should be produced, because they are the ones who are footing the bill, the taxpayers. So at municipal level and other government institutions, they need to prioritize areas of interest and priority to society in line with their governmental mandate. And as such, research organizations, research institutions should respond to those priorities. Whether or not we are doing that and doing it efficiently or sufficiently is a very big question. My take is that we are not scratching even the bottom of that particular barrel. Whether corporate does prioritize knowledge that is beneficial to society, that also is a very important question. And we have always spoken about he who pays the piper, specifically in relation to knowledge that is funded from big NGOs, knowledge that is funded from outside of the country, because those who prioritize and fund knowledge production have got their own interests, which may not necessarily be 100% in sync with the interest of the nation. And therefore, we have to continuously critique the kind of grants and sponsorships that we receive, especially if the focus of such knowledge production is determined without us. To use the famous political adage, it should be not knowledge produced for us without us, or dictated for us without us. So we should inform knowledge production themes and focus, even emanating from outside, even though the sponsorships might be emanating from outside the country. But beggars are not always choosers. And I would say that the majority of grants that are channeled for research purposes don't necessarily at all times address the pertinent issues confronting us as society. And of course, there is knowledge production for knowledge sake, knowledge pursuit sake. There are many among us who pursue what we call or term blue sky research. But the big question is, do we want to prioritize that for a society, a developmental society of our caliber, or do we want to make sure that at least only 10% of our finances goes to that, and 90% goes to areas of critical importance that have immediate to medium-term interest. And I think if we were to aggregate the proportion of knowledge production and financing, we may have to say, and I'm giving arbitrary numbers here, we may have to say 40% will deal with challenges of today and tomorrow, and 40% will deal with challenges of the day after, and 10% can deal with speculative knowledge production. I think that is very important when we do disburse government funds, taxpayers' funds in pursuit of knowledge production, so that we can address challenges that are very, very important and pressing for us as society. The second question I want to raise is how does it show that relevant knowledge is being produced? There are studies that have been conducted if we go to OECD and we look at literature generally, you will realize there are studies that does argue the correlation between knowledge production and societal development. And I think the more we spend on knowledge production, there should be commensurate development associated with that economy or that country. Because if we are pouring money down the barrel, big hole, and there is nothing to show for it, then I wonder if that endeavor is necessary or important. Knowledge production that resolve immediate societal challenges in the area of industrialization, for argument's sake, becomes very, very important. And that partnership between institutions of knowledge production, which might include research councils and universities, that partnership becomes primary in making sure that we develop the right type and kinds of knowledge. The third question I ask is, who funds knowledge? There are quite a lot of interesting statistics that disaggregate the proportion of funding by government, by corporate, and by third sector or NGO sector, including foreign government and foreign institutions. And you will see with those expenditure patterns, investment patterns, that the great chunk of investment does indeed come from the public coffers. Government funding in South Africa is the biggest. I don't have the slides with me, but it is the biggest proportion, and it would be good if you can look at those distribution of funding across those three spheres that I have just articulated. So it is very important that government prioritizes, but government ought to ask itself continuously whether or not it is getting value for money. It ought to monitor, it ought to evaluate and agree that indeed we are getting value for money. The forms of knowledge that we are producing, of course, in big research projects, experimental research in laboratories, hospitals, clinical trials that we are doing, and of course, thesis and dissertation. All of these continue to be executed by and large at research councils in South Africa, as well as here at our universities, churning out books, book chapters, journal articles. And the biggest question we should ask over and over again is the accessibility of knowledge. Can we say with confidence that knowledge is easily accessible, including by those who are funding knowledge? I don't think so. It is not. And I think this is the question that government ought to be asking every day. If we have spent 10 billion investment in knowledge, can we access this particular knowledge? Where is it? Is it housed by some big corporations in Europe, in the USA, and we still have to pay again in order to access the knowledge that we have funded, we have sponsored for its generation? Because if that is the case, and it is the case, then we have a very big challenge in our hands, which needs to be addressed. We cannot double pay for the production as well as for the access of the very knowledge that we have produced, that we have financed. I think it is an injustice that Ibrahim Patel made reference to. As such, the question of open access, open science becomes extremely important, because as we observe here in our own universities, academics are paying between 40 to 100,000 in page fee. Yes, please.
Sorry to disturb. Can we have your concluding remarks, please?
Oh, yes, please. I can see that I'm going on forever. Yes, let me conclude. Let me just jump to conclusion. So in conclusion, I would say we should prioritize the following. Let me just pinpoint only 4 points. Number one, every university should have a publishing house. to demonstrate that they are indeed a publishing, a research and knowledge generation institution. A university without a publishing house is not an institution of knowledge production as far as I'm concerned. And I think we need to talk about that. Number two, we've got to promote publication and establishment of local journals. Local journals that will become free in access, but equally free to publish in. Because the amount of money that we are spending in international journals can be spent on these journals to subsidize and to make sure that even we can spend less than half of what we are spending to make sure that these journals are there and they are accessible, and the quality of those is continuously prioritized and improved. Let me stop there so that I don't waste too much of your time, Susan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you for your insightful sort of ideas that you've shared with us. Certainly some food for thought and being quite critical of the system as such. So thank you very much for that. Please, can I now move to Ms. Dunster, who is the CHALSA chairperson, and she's also the director of the Rhodes University. Norma, over to you for some comments from CHALSA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Putting up my presentation. Is it visible?
Yes, it is. If you could just put it on full presentation mode, would be appreciative. Thank you.
Is that okay?
No, it's not on full presentation mode as yet.
From my side.
And I think you're on slide number
is.
3, and you should, if you want to backtrack to slide number 1, perhaps.
Okay, let me see. Yeah, okay. Just a sec. Is that
There you
okay?
go. Perfect. Thank you, Vetu.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. First and foremost, let me thank USAF and the organizers of these webinars and for affording us an opportunity as CHALSA to come and present the perspective from the academic library side of things. My name is Nomawethu Dunster. I am the Director of Library and Information Services at Rhodes University. I am also the current chairperson of CHALSA from 2024 to 2026. I've been requested to present the academic library perspective, what is happening on the ground and what is happening at CHALSA. So this is my content page. Who is CHALSA, the framework, the strategic objectives, open science or open access, what is the library perspective, what are the barriers to open access, and what are the CHALSA open access projects, and then I will conclude. Who is CHALSA? If you follow that link, you'll find that CHALSA is made up of 29 entities, the 26 higher education libraries in South Africa, and those are the heads of libraries, as well as the National Library of South Africa, and CSIR, the librarian from CSIR, and the director from the Medical Research Council. So we are a committee of 29 members. We've got partnerships as CHALSA. LIASA is our partner. We have entered into a memorandum of understanding, as well as USAF. Actually, USAF, we are the COP of USAF. We work very closely with TENET. Recently, we are working with CLOCS for long-time preservation. We've got close associates abroad, CAL, which is the Council of Australian University Libraries, AFLIA in Africa, and IFLA internationally. Those are the close associates of CHELSA. Recently, CHELSA has put together a strategic framework from 2025 to 2028, and it is a forward-thinking strategy. It has revised its vision, it has revised its mission towards the library of the future. So that is the bold preamble for CHELSA. In pursuit of excellence and commitment, CHELSA recognizes the importance of solid governance and visionary leadership. CHELSA strives to strategically position itself for increased visibility and impact, embracing the power of collaboration and partnerships in achieving its mission. The role of CHELSA is to provide the national leadership through guidelines, through frameworks, standards, and benchmarks, and principles for best practice. It does not necessarily develop institutional strategies or operational templates. So moving away from that, the recent, the newly approved or almost approved strategic plan of CHELSA has identified these 5 strategic objectives for research support, which also has emphasis on open science and open access. CHELSA, in implementing its strategy, it will investigate the best practices in digital scholarship, scholarly communication, and open access ecosystems, and establish benchmarking standards for the libraries. It will develop position papers on the role of libraries in advancing open scholarship. I'm mentioning these objectives because they are closely aligned with the open access agenda. To developing those frameworks for managing and sharing research data and research output, also supporting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and guidelines for preservation, effective records management, and archival access. All these initiatives, in one way or the other, support the open access project. I have used this a slide from UNESCO because somebody asked what is open access and what is open science. And I've been asking myself which one should come first. Is it an egg and chicken situation? But I eventually made a decision that, okay, it means open science should precede open access, because you can see that there's open access is a branch of open science, and there's all other open data, the citizen science, open source, and all those. I found that open science is quite rich and broad, including open educational resources. I think we have a tendency of focusing only on open access, on open infrastructure, on open data, perhaps neglecting citizen science, and then look at open educational resources. But we have not yet covered all those in our approaches to open science. So I've got those 2 definitions that I got from the UNESCO website. For some reason now my slide is, but there's a difference between the 2. And I've learned over time that you need first and foremost to put the systems in place that is open science, and then you can deliver on open access. Okay. Now, what is happening in academic libraries in as far as open access is concerned? Here we are saying, if we're going to look at the academic library perspective, you'll find that most academic library strategic plans, in their core mission, they have got this drive to provide equitable access to information in perpetuity. And in advancing this mission, the mother institutions and libraries look at governance and management issues of open access, Most, if not all, academic libraries in South Africa, through their institutions, are signatories to the open access declarations. They look at infrastructure to capture research data and output. They preserve it and make it accessible. They've developed open access policies or guidelines. They've developed research data management policies. And as we are doing now, they are celebrating this event, the Open Access Week celebrations, almost every year. And libraries have also adopted resource sharing at a larger scale. At CHELSA, there are reciprocal agreements to share resources, the interlibrary loans, but this service is for postgraduate students. It benefits them and academics, researchers, or staff in general. Libraries have put up the open access institutional repositories. Most of them are on DSpace platform. Most libraries, or at least 50%, have got their own local journals published on OJS platform. Open research data repositories are there. 90% of the libraries, or 95%, are on the Figshare platform, and the open educational resources. And up and above this, there are open access resources that are evaluated and made accessible. In terms of services, I'm not going to take time on this. Either libraries or their research offices fund APCs. They provide scholarly communication services. They provide digital
Betu?
scholarship hubs. Yes.
Sorry to disturb. Please, could you start concluding your presentation?
Okay. I think I've been to this. Sorry. Okay, so I thought I would be looking at barriers or hindrances to open access. I like this slide. Universities tend to maintain a narrow perspective on the commoditization of ideas. They focus mainly on production of research papers. You heard Prof talking about that. Then there's a problem with the reward systems for researchers, which I think will be addressed today. These are all the barriers to open access. The incentive system for private sector companies, these need to be taken care of as well. Research data infrastructure, the national mandates, data analysis, the skills, the lack of necessary skills. So these are all the hindrances that need to be addressed if we are to win this battle. So these are the CHELSA Open Access Project, the national ETD. This provides the national platform for improved accessibility, visibility, and discoverability of South African theses and dissertations. The stats database is an initiative to increase that came as a result of demands from university management to show evidence-based reporting on library performance. And so recently we've engaged with UbuntuNet, which is a promising project that will fund skills development for managing repositories, data science, and all the stuff that we need. In conclusion, knowledge production is the process of generating new knowledge, often through research, but this is my own emphasis to say this is what the researchers focus on. There's a second part of it, which is knowledge sharing and dissemination. Here, this is the library focus, my own emphasis again. But both are crucial. So if attention could be paid to both, and I've taken this from Professor Jeffrey Bolton of the University of Edinburgh. These are the consulted sources. Thank you, Ndiabulela Baya. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Betu. Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to ask Mr. Charlie Molepo, who is the president of the Library and Information Association of South Africa, to please also please give us the insights then of LIHASA. Thank you very much, Charlie. Over to you. Charlie, you have a little bit less than 10 minutes, so please proceed.
Thank you very much. Hopefully I should be able to get through. This is a perspective from the LIHASA, which is the professional body SAQA registered professional body that is responsible for professionalization of the association of the library profession. So as LIASA, we actually do believe that knowledge should be for public good and not a commodity. So if you look at what we would then call a sustainable open access ecosystem, we look at the issue around inclusiveness, transparency, collaborative and ethical. All those four pillars would then speak to what we would then call a healthy, sustainable ecosystem. The question, who owns the knowledge? Is it the author? Is it the publisher? Is it the funder? Is it the community? We can even include, although funder might be implied by the universities themselves or government that then funds those researchers. So according to our belief is that in many cases, ownership should be vested. It's vested in economic power. So most people who have economic power then controls that information. And in our case, you would see that mainly it will be the publishers themselves and to a lesser extent the funders. So as LIASA, we then advocate that for a shared stewardship of knowledge where access and benefit are equally distributed. That is the belief, to say that's where the ownership of the knowledge should reside. So if you look at our role as LIASA in advocacy for open access, if you look at our role in terms of the advocacy, is that we believe that these challenges, if we work together, the issues around article processing charges, we can, if we work together, drive them. And I must say, I'm really disappointed by where we find ourselves. Around 2020, Susan will remember, we are beginning to work as a group, especially the library profession, driving the open access movement. But we are beginning to disintegrate back to our own institutions. And I was hoping when this project came into being that we will see then convergence of all universities. But I can tell you now, today only there are more than 4 Open Access Week celebrations that are happening at different institutions. And all over the week, almost 8 different institutions. And that is not good for this movement. And the whole issue around digital divide also, that is to say, how then do we ensure that those people that would still find it difficult? I think here maybe we will look at that policy and maybe when it's, I wonder if it will still go out for public comment. But if it would, one would look at the issue, how does government mitigate the issue around digital divide so that those who don't have resources for data are still able to access information. And obviously the colonial legacies of the past, where you find that we tend to rely more on the global north. Maybe here, unfortunately, I'm moving a bit faster than I would have loved because of the time now that was taken by earlier speakers. I would have loved to speak a little bit on the practical things that we need to do as a country. And we as a professional body of librarians, we would then be able to, I'm glad Divis Prof earlier indicated some of them around the issue of universities publishing themselves, around that we build a system that replicate communicating our research output. And NRF, when they do the rating, look at the whole issue around not only prioritizing not only prioritizing what we know known journals, but we know that ASAF has a standard. If those local journal pass the standard that we set ourselves, we should encourage publication in those. And NRF themselves, and in terms of rewarding of tenure, they should not disadvantage. And lastly, we need to work together. And that's it from our side, that as institutions, as librarians, as funders, as government, we need to come and work together. And I hope 2026 Open Access Week will have these webinars nationally and not have individual small celebration, and that would make me Liasa happy. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie, and my sincere apologies to actually put the pressure on you to hurry up to say what you have to say. But I think your presentation actually resonates with me quite well. I would not take up all my time that has been allocated to me, because I still want to invite Professor Ahmed Bawa, who was the previous CEO of USAF, to also just say a few concluding words before we actually conclude this particular webinar. So I would like to agree that we started with huge enthusiasm in South Africa for promoting open access at the time per se. But today, as we found over the last couple of years, it's very decentralized and actually not coordinated. So that actually calls for concern. Therefore, also our interest into the open science policy framework, because we believe that is the core sort of hook and grounding and foundation for the open science work to take place in South Africa. ASAF was very involved in the actual drafting of the open science framework, and therefore we also have been actively promoting open access over the last 15 years through the work of ASAF. But then recently we moved to open science because of the UNESCO recommendations. So there are huge alignment, not only with national priorities, but also with international priorities like the UNESCO recommendations for open science. We as ASAF have really prioritized ourselves and have aligned us very thoroughly with the outcomes and sort of the projected work that needs to be done with in the open science framework. So for us as ASAF, the open science policy is an absolute central to ASAF's work, because the Academy stands right at the crossroads of science, society, and national development. So let me just very quickly and briefly say then why is it important for us that the open science policy also get approved by Cabinet, and that is to reflect balance, connection and transformation. So as said, we have been very involved in open science for the last couple of years, and it aligns very much with the work that we do at ASAF. I think out of sort of desperation, ASAF has also as a sister document to our transformation strategy, to our science engagement strategy, we also compiled an ASAF open science policy so that we at least can show the world and demonstrate how we see how interwoven openness is in the work that we do. Everything we do, everything we publish is open, and it's available on our website in terms of its openness. We also not only promote open science, but also to start looking at the digital divide, and we give a lot of leadership in terms of artificial intelligence, the Quest magazine, South African Journal of Science, and then the well-bespoke Cielo South Africa platform that we host at ASAF. Cielo South Africa is 15 years old and only journals of quality, which is open accessible, full text, is then placed on our database. We follow a hybrid model between gold and diamond. Just to give you an idea of the 350 odd journals being published in South Africa, only half of it is open accessible. And of that half, only about a half is available through Diamond Open Access availability. So that's quite problematic, and more work has to be done. At the moment, South Africa as a whole follows a hybrid model between gold and diamond, and is diamond not yet the standard to which publishers actually publish their journals in. This is debatable, and this needs to be probed. Why not? And we will release a study that we've done in terms of APCs and the choice of publishing in Diamond Open Access journals very soon. We stand in the service of society. As said, we do science engagement, and open science is one of the main topics in what we do, science engagement. We have done a couple of standards through our POPIA, which speaks about open data and how we share our data, which is a very important document, and it is well embedded into research offices of universities as such. We have also looked at the detriment of editors and peer reviewers, and we've released a statement about a year ago where we spoke about the fact that editors and peer reviewers should be rewarded for the work that they do, etc. And we are also looking at to suggest, and we would welcome some discussions with Yusuf at some point, how it can be integrated in the KPIs of editors and peer reviewers. I would just like to sort of conclude and say that for us, Open Science isn't just a policy document. It's a transformative mindset, and I think that's very important. It represents also equity by opening doors for all, and integrity through transparency, and impact by ensuring knowledge serves society and leadership, as South Africa helps guide Africa into a knowledge-based future. So Open Science for us turns knowledge into a shared public good, a foundation for innovation, trust, and progress. I thank you very much for the opportunity to also share a couple of ideas from my side. Professor Bawa, can I then just quickly hand over to you, if you can perhaps share your ideas then with us over a minute or two, so that we can have some concluding comments and next steps in closing. Thank you very much.
Susan, we're just trying to connect Prof. Bauer. So maybe so while we're trying to connect him, maybe we can take some questions.
Absolutely. I will then move to the questions. I see that everybody has already been popping some questions in the chat box. So thank you very much for that. I think the first question that I am really sort of interested in is, what is the role of university leadership in driving open access? Can I perhaps ask Professor Niswera to perhaps respond to this question? Sorry to pounce on you, Prof. Is he still here? It doesn't seem like that. No, I cannot see him in the participant list. If somebody wants to confirm at some point, that would be great. Then we have another question. If those who fund research have their own interest, does government and policy makers have mechanisms in place to keep these interests in check? And perhaps, Imran, that question I could direct to you.
Yeah, okay, my camera switched on. Yeah, I mean, the way I would answer that is that we have a way of assessing, but not necessarily, I think the word being used is keep it in check. I mean, it's a bit strong, if I get the question correct, because we have an open system. I think many of the people here would take offense to government playing a key role. You have your established partnerships, etc. So in that strong way that it's described, I don't think it makes sense. If it says, if those who fund research have their own interests, does government and policymakers have mechanisms in check place to keep these interests in check. Where we co-fund, yes, then we make sure that these matters are dealt with. We have like European Union partners, etc. But if people fund this on their own, and the data is extracted, that's up to the funding entity, whether it's the universities, etc., to take care of that. That's from a DSTI perspective, yeah. But I also think we need to get a more nuanced understanding of those interests, and what exactly is the problem, particularly where things are being done in some way through public funding. I mean, researchers may have their own, at universities, may have their own research projects, but because they receive grants from the HET, then they would be able to do it. From a DSTI perspective, like I said, I think the key way is during co-funded projects, we ensure that our interests are not contradicted. Thanks.
Thank you, Imran. Thank you for giving us that perspective. Very true. That's right. And then we have a question, but I am going to allow this person to actually ask this question and to unmute himself, and that is Mr. Faladi. You were mentioning to say we need to deal with policy contradictions within the national system of innovation. Policy contradictions and a lack of it. Therefore, within the system, it is not helping at all. Would you like to pose your question live, Mr. Paledi? Is Mr. Paledi still online?
Good day, colleagues.
Yes, thank you, sir. Please proceed. Can you just be brief?
Thank you so much.
Thank
you so much. Mine was not the question per se, but just wanted to give a perspective around the issue of open science, open access. You know, and I was looking from the Mr. Patel slide in terms of the challenges, and other speakers, of course, in terms of this issue, which I think for me, it's one of the elements within the room. We have a serious challenge in terms of policy, contradiction when it comes to open science, open access within the whole system of innovation. Starting with the DHET policy on research outputs. If you look at that policy, there are a number of limitations in terms of how that policy could actually use to advance open access. The policy does not actually, it's very silent in terms of addressing the real pending issues, with regard to financial aspect of open access. It's very much silent. It's very silent in terms of the open article processing fees. For me, that's a challenge. And secondly, the policy, another policy on, a rating system and application of that policy thereof. It's also self-limiting in terms of propelling, universities and research council within the country to actually make open access and open science a default, mechanism to flip the system. For me, those are some of the challenges that you need to deal with. And actually, with regard to the policy that Mr. Patel actually, made mention of it, this national policy on open access has been in the making for the past 10 years. For me, key issue there is what has been happening all along. What are the issues? What are the limitations? Why it took us so long to actually, get approval of this policy? And for me, the policy offer a number of opportunities in terms of addressing the real issues. As you can see from the report, some of the provision actually contradict what we see in the DHET policy on research outputs. One was expecting that once that policy, has been approved, then those, policies, seated individual government departments and other, entities will have to be revised. But unfortunately, the more we delay it means that we have to live with the status quo, and we're not doing anything. Unless we start tackling this policy, contradiction within the system, I don't think we'll go anywhere in terms of making sure that the public funded research and knowledge becomes freely available to society to address societal impact. And of course, how then do we go about, making sure that the research that we produce is in a position to address and improve the lives and livelihoods of our society? If it's not, behind payment hawks.
Mr. Paladi, can I just ask you to perhaps just round up? We would like to give some opportunity just for a quick
Yes,
response as
you know,
well.
just in simple terms, colleagues, let's start with the basics. Let's fix the policy contradictions around open science, open access issues, open data, and so on. That was my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry that I'm had to cut you short. I'm not sure, Mr. Patel, would you like to just perhaps have a quick answer, the one about the DHET? I could also assist.
Yes, just two comments. One is we agree that, you know, it's time to accelerate the policy implementation. It's taken a while. There's different reasons for that. And then in terms of the policy, one of the pillars that I mentioned was policy and regulatory and reforms. And that will include re-looking at, you know, the DHET output policy, the NRF policy. So there would need to be a bit more discussion. I got a high-level sense, but we may have to dig down a bit more in detail on exactly what is the issue and how to change it and what's the implications. So I've taken note of those two policies that were mentioned by Dr. Paladi. And as part of the regulatory reform, we will look at that in more detail. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patel. Indeed, I think there are much deeper issues to these questions, etc. And the coordination between them all is important. But I think it's also important for participants to understand the difference between the DHET research output policy and the open science policy. One has to really study the research output policy in depth to understand what is the purpose thereof. It's a funding stream, it's a funding mechanism for institutions. And I think in that framework, it is important to note that. But I also want to mention that the DHET does not discriminate against open science journals if you publish in an open science journal, nor does it discriminate between national and international journals. And I think that it means and it implies that it's actually quite an open policy in that particular sense. But I do get your problem, Dr. Paladi, and I do understand sort of where you're coming from and what you're raising. I think broadly it raises a question about the funding. If we roll out also the open science framework, already as indicated by Mr. Patel, there are so many issues and points and institutions and bodies that needs to, I think, receive some very specific funding to make sure that the open science principles and the sort of projected activities do take place as a result of the actual policy as such. Colleagues, it is 12:16. I just want to very quickly round up, and I believe that Dr. Bawa cannot join us as such, but he will have an opportunity tomorrow morning to share his ideas with you. So he's not lost for this conversation. He has an important role to play there as well. So for me specifically, I think there are two very important issues, is that we must regroup, we must work together, and we must promote open science as a system, like we did many years ago. And we must not fragmentize and decentralize our efforts, but rather pull them together to ensure that we as a country speak together in terms of open science, and that we can also profile the work that we do under a much larger banner. I think that's very important, is to group together. And then secondly, I think it was very clear from all the presentations that we all realize what the challenges are. And maybe we could work on those challenges because I think they fit very nicely into Mr. Patel's table that he had there at one point, sort of highlighting the challenges. And I think maybe through that we can actually prioritize the challenges and try and address them and see which of those really need some funding and some input and broader coordination, and which of those are the things that's already happening and realizing through our projects, etc. So those are the two issues for me, is the challenges that we have to address, and then grouping again together so that we collectively can actually address this problem. I think it's important for us all and for the benefit of society in South Africa. And I thank you very much and have a good break. And we'll see you back in 12 minutes. So please grab a cup of coffee and we'll see you back. And thank you very much for this first half of this session. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thanks to everyone. Thanks, Susan.
Yeah. Look, when you're doing telephonic interviews, it's a little bit easy because usually you know your population. Here, if we were doing a survey about staff satisfaction, we know the staff. So we may say, okay, the university has got 1,000. We don't know what to interview this approach. So we're going to sample using margin of error, which is between the error. Let's say 8 to 200. And then we say out of the 200, this stuff. But in cases the population is because even with drop out students, you know how many
That's what when it comes to the cancellation of because all those who cancel the inspection or also children.
the list is there.
The list is there.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can we do a quick check that all the speakers for this afternoon session are in the call? If you can all just put your cameras on, please. So we've got everybody. We've got Nicholas, we've got Glenn, we've got Wetu, Andrew, Knox, Reggie. Andrew, is that all of you? Is that a full house for you, Andrew?
Hi, Janet. Yes, thank you. I think that's everyone. Hello, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. 1 minute to go and then you can kick off.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope everybody's back from their body break, got a cup of tea, got a cup of coffee, and ready for the next session. All good.
Great. Hello, everyone. Janet, is it okay to go ahead and start?
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Andrew.
Thank you so much. Thanks very much, everyone. And I wonder if I could ask the speakers to just turn their cameras on, just so everyone can see you. And then perhaps when you're not speaking, you can turn it off, just so that everyone can see you. Well, thank you very much for joining this session. I think it's a really amazing, broad-ranging initiative, and thank you, Yusuf, for pulling this together. I'm Andrew Joseph. I'm the digital publisher. I think someone's not muted. Could we ask people to mute themselves, please? Or Janet, if you could, that would be great. So I'm Andrew Joseph. I'm the digital publisher at Wits University Press. I have been involved in several open access initiatives and know quite a few of you, having looked at the names of participants. I also work closely. I'm on the organizing committee for USAP with this open access task force. I also represent the Publishers Association in a number of things and several other OA organizations. I think it's I'm just going to do a brief summary, perhaps, and not take up too much time. There are really interesting speakers that we have on this panel. And I think this issue of the funding models is really something that's plagued, speaking from a publisher perspective, but I think from the research perspective as well, that has plagued us for a long time, since almost definitely since at least the Finch report in the early 10s. I suspect that an issue with this, there are two main issues that I can see, and I think that we will share some consensus on, is the notion of definitions varying across our different interests. So of course we all have shared interests for a more equitable, just, and progressive mode of producing and using research, and for this to be sustainable. So on the broad policy level, on the broad intent level, we're quite well aligned. But the devil's in the detail with this, and there is possibly a substantial amount of uncoordinatedness in terms of implementation and activity. And I think this panel really represents 4 stakeholders who have a broad range of interests. So funders, library, consortia. I'd like to throw my own little perspective into this and say that there are perhaps 5 with a publisher perspective on this. I'm not representing publishers in this forum itself, but my work at Wits Press and with things like the Publishers Association and various organizations, perhaps it allows us to really begin to thresh this out. So I want to suggest to the speakers that I think what we're going to do is really problematize some of these models, some of the issues with them, shortcomings, possibilities as well. And I think everyone's going to really be speaking from their own individual perspectives, which is going to be very valuable for everyone to finally be able to articulate this. I think it would be good for us to also articulate and identify some interests, some objectives, things we share in common, but really I feel strongly that you could really emphasize your own perspectives on these. I'm hoping that we can tease out 2 or 3 sort of major points, either of departure and or of shared interest. If I miss anything, please do raise this in the Q&A and the speakers at any point as well. But I'm hoping that there are 2 or 3 points that we have where we can say these are some of the central issues on this. I'd also like the panelists to, while they're doing this and while the discussion's going on, to just think about with the last comments for suggested actions around these 3 issues, or the issues that we raise with this. And then the very last thing, which I hope we can do today, but it's possible that this may actually come up in the bigger panel discussion tomorrow, that the session that Glenn is going to be chairing, is something like an action plan using this forum in order to do this. So without me blathering on anymore, I'd like to hand over to the first speaker, Nokuthula from the National Research Foundation. Thank you for joining us, and I'll let you go ahead with that. I won't do any introductions. I'm sure you'd be able to do it. If you could just say your name and designation and the organization and that kind of thing, that would be great. Thanks very much, Nokuthula. Thank you. I think you're muted, I'm afraid.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Can I just...
People who like this, I will also join this. They want to tend to react to the people that will be all the time. It's easier to move.
Yes, so let me share my screen. Okay. Am I audible, and can you see my screen?
Audible, and we can see your screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm Nokuthula Mkhunu from the NRF. You can call me Nox in short. I've been looking after I was Deputy Director in the African Open Science Platform, which most of you know is based at the NRF. I have moved now to Director of International Grants and Partnership, which is quite well, because now I'm very focused on the open science for the NRF. So please excuse the background noise a little bit. I'm in the Brussels for the Africa-EU engagement. So on my side, thank you again from USAF from getting us together. And I had some of the concerns at the beginning about being fragmented in space. And I think this is why USAF is trying to slowly try to start this so that we can get together to everyone on this discussion, not only around the time for Open Access International Week, but we should be continuously having this conversation. And as an NRF, they have been asked to speak about sustainable funding models. For us, what is the perspective? And I think Imran started touching a little bit on what would be the role of the NRF. And I have heard some of the questions about funders and the way we assess proposals that should be looked at. And we are currently doing our own strategizing on the draft of the NRF Open Science Strategy, which will align with the DSTI as it stands stands now. So of course, these are some of the things that we need to think about, that in the knowledge space, which we've been trying very hard to change this mentality, we really seen as some type of a data point, but really seen as the author or the owner of the knowledge. So the question and the topic that is chosen for this year for the Open Access Week, who owns the knowledge, is actually more and more in time for the African continent and the global south to ask ourselves this. And in reality, as we stand in now, as the situation, the author, the owner, and even government and the public funders do not own the knowledge that we are producing. So who owns the knowledge? The reality as we stand now is that it is based on who is making the most money out of research. It's not who funds research, it's who is making the most money out of research. So the current, of course, we've seen this, is now what we started, and many people before me on open access. Is it what we want now? Is it worth the cost? Is the staggering profits made by publishing, is this the open science, open access we want? And of course, we know that the libraries, based on this, we're asking them as academics, as public funders, to do simple the impossible on the budgets that they have. So of course, I picked up in the APC issues there's a paper is a little bit old now, published, that shows that generally in the last 5 years, between 2019 and 2023, how much the large 3 publishers have cost the publishing world. So these are the basic cost of the publishing. And I know one of the questions this was raised, how much the academics pay for the current open access model that is the most prevalent around at this moment in time. And we know people in the continent and in South Africa, we cannot, this is not sustainable in order to pay for our own visibility, to pay to participate in the knowledge system, and this is not simple and equitable model. And if you add this up in this analyze 5 years, it costs the community $10 billion on top of what was funded for the research. Just to publish the research, it costs $10 billion on top of the already investment that were made by mostly government and public funders to fund the research just for 5 main publishers. This is not sustainable. So of course, as South Africa and as a global community, we really need now to look maybe new models, sometimes not new systems of publishing, or now I use this science communication because I think also the way we think about what do we mean by publishing, what do we mean by communicating science, as long as we stick to an article as the way to communicate our science, or stick only to a book as the way to communicate science, we'll still be kind of thinking in the same box. So what should be the new part to leading in this equitable open access? And of course, I won't touch on this because this is not for today's discussion. Research assessment and incentive will be the big driver into changing culture and mindset of researchers who produce most of this knowledge in how they participate in a more equitable model of publishing. Of course, for me, I think the answer has always been clear, and as the NRF, we are starting to see, based on also on the policy, how do we transition to this? And for me, currently, the models that we can really think about, that they should be our own, ideally to reach is, of course, Diamond, open access, and repositories. And of course, they need financial investment. But as I've shown before, we are already investing about $10 billion into the system. South Africa is also contributing into that. How, as we as a country, can we figure out on the current pot that we have, not trying to find new money, how do we invest that into more sustainable models of communicating knowledge, where knowledge will stay within us, we will own it, and we are not continuously renting our own knowledge that we have given up to commercial entities that make profits out of this. I will stop there, and I hope I didn't go over time. And thank you again for giving us this opportunity again. I know people, as a side note, say that the NRF should be responsible also about review. We ask for a number of publication, where you publish, but you must remember, as the NRF, the review committees are made up of academics. So it's the academics who decide what does excellence mean. So this is the culture and the incentive that we need to think about, which is really not what we are discussing today. Thank you, and I will stop there.
Thank you, Nokuthula. Thank you very much for that. Very, very interesting to hear from you. Janet, I just wonder if you could give me some direction on who the next speaker would be, please.
Yes.
Will it be Glenn, or is it Wetu who's going to speak next? Okay. I guess Janet has stepped away from her machine. Glenn, thanks very much for joining us. I think if you could go ahead, that would be great. And thank you, Nokuthula, for also just keeping it within the time limit. Glenn, sorry to put that pressure on you, but if you could keep it to that would be great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
We can see your slides, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Before I worked for SANLIC, I worked for the Paraffin Safety Association of South Africa. And one of, I experienced firsthand the frustration of wanting to access knowledge that would make the world a better place, and felt the frustration of paywalls. And the problem we face is that our entire university system is structured around the concept of paying to read. So there in itself, there's a massive structural problem that we really do need to think about when we look for solutions around how to transition to open access. So I'm going to speak about SANLIC's role in repurposing money that has been spent on reading to transition to open access. So the key issue is, what knowledge is it that we need to access? So obviously we need to access our own knowledge, but if you take the global generation of knowledge, you'll see that China and the United States are by far the biggest generators of knowledge. And between them, I believe they produce close to 50% of the world's research articles, journal research articles. But if you look at how they're publishing, you'll see that China publishes, this gray is 75% of it is behind the paywall. Another 23% is in fully open journals. And there's a little smidgen of read and publish agreement publishing. In fact, it's 0.7%. United States is worse, where they have 80% of their content closed. Now, the challenge we face is that we need our researchers to be able to access that knowledge. And because of the system, the publishers have forced researchers to sign over their copyright to the publishers, who then sell it back as a subscription. So when we looked at read and publish agreements, or transformational agreements, or transformative agreements, I use those terms interchangeably, there were 4 key elements that we wanted to guarantee, which were aligned with the South African draft National Open Science Policy. The first is, we had to make sure that our authors could access the knowledge that they needed to access in order to do their work. Secondly, and I have to stress this, is that no matter how much we transform, we have this problem that currently roughly 50% of the world's research remains behind a paywall. Secondly, we wanted to make sure that our researchers could publish full and immediate open access, but in a way that ensured that they could keep their copyright, and also that they wouldn't have to have any encounter any author-facing charges. Another key issue was, how do we contain costs, and I'll come back to that. And then finally, which has been well touched on already, is the issue of inclusivity and social justice. So our problem is that more than 98% of all the research we access is paid for as a system in South Africa through foreign currency. And our problem there is that our currency has been decreasing against major currencies. This plot here, the blue line shows that what you could purchase, the money that you had to purchase 100 units of something back in 1979, you could now only purchase three and a half units in 2025. So that gives you a sense of how much our currency has been eroded. The green line represents the fluctuations of the rand against the US dollar, and the orange line is $1 US. So we're confronted with that as the major inequality that we're having to face, and that we have to build strategies around. In 2020, we did a study of 2014 to 2019 and found that the blue represents publishing behind a paywall compared to the lighter colors representing different forms of open access. And you can see that most of our research was growing in quantity, as well as there was more and more open access publishing, but closed publishing was also growing. So between those 5 years, at least 2/3 of our research was behind the paywall, and that's what we needed to address. The other issue is that more than probably about 80% of that research was with the 5 largest publishers that you can see on this scale, and the remainder of the SANLEC agreements were with the other 45 publishers that we had agreements with. And then you can see that most of the open access publishing was happening in journals with publishers that we did not have an agreement with. And the question we asked is, what if we did accept to pay an article processing charge for each and every article, and we were able to flip all of our articles overnight? What would happen to our expenditure? And you can see that if everyone in the world did that, and we didn't have to pay to read anywhere, we would reduce all this reading, which is represented in blue, as well as this publishing with APCs in the wild, in gold and hybrid journals. And if you took the average APC at the time, that's how much we would have paid. And if you just looked at the big 5, you would see that we would almost save most of the expenditure on reading and publishing. So with that in mind, we set out to negotiate read and publish agreements, and we've secured 16 so far. Some of them are with the large publishers, and some of them are really small agreements. We don't have time to dwell on this too long, but some of the publishers agreed to let us publish as much as we could. Others wanted to cap the number of open access articles we could publish with them. And our objective was to turn a situation where these pie charts represent publishing in hybrid journals. In 2019, that is the pie of where we were publishing. By 2024, we had secured read and publish agreements with more than 80% of them, which meant that if our researchers continued to publish in the same venues, they could now do so open access without paying any fee. So this is just a count of both fully open and hybrid journals, and this last graph is of them combined, meaning that our agreements covered at least 12,000 journals. And our first year of read and publish, we had a very small read and publish sector, but by the end of 2024, we had covered most of it, together with the fully open publishing, meant that we were, we had covered a very large area. Now, the key issue, and it was raised earlier, is what about the APC? And what about predatory publishing? Now, the key issue with a read and publish agreement is that we don't pay anything more than what we used to pay when we read only, when we were paying to read. And obviously, there's some sort of inflationary annual increase. But otherwise, we're not paying more. And here we use the APC figures to calculate how much of that subscription spend has been able to be repurposed to cover publishing. And these are the 2024 figures, and you can see that we repurposed 265,000 of the reading expenditure to cover articles in hybrid journals, and another 30 million. Sorry, did I say 1,000? It's million. 265 million and 30 million. So nearly 300 million in 2024 was repurposed from subscription expenditure. Bearing in mind that we spend roughly 800 million rand a year on reading and publishing through SANLEC. This is just to show you what happens within one of those agreements. You can see with Taylor and Francis, most of our publishing with the blue was behind the paywall. The deal came into place in 2024, and you can see immediately that most of it is now open access. The same applies with Springer Nature, and less so with Elsevier. We think we know why, but at least most of the publishing has the majority of the publishing is now fully open. So I've already mentioned the fees that have been repurposed, so I'm not going to dwell on that. We've also made inroads into the fully open journals, although they traditionally are not part of a subscription. And with some of them, we've got 100% waiver, and in others, we've got smaller discounts, which are not great, but it's better than nothing. This shows the number of articles in those 16 agreements across 21 to 2024. And it's pleasing to note that a G20 Research and Innovation Scorecard recognized that South Africa is now publishing above the average for the G20 countries, and it's approximately 66% of our research is now open access. This is just the same information from the Curtin Open Knowledge Initiative, where they reckon that only 32% of our content was closed in 2024. The important thing for our researchers is that their research is definitely more visible. This is data from Springer for 2024, showing that the anonymous usage is basically usage that is not coming from a subscription IP address. So it shows very clearly that our research is far more visible when it is open access. So to wrap up, let's go over some of the key points that I was trying to stress. Firstly, through these read and publish agreements, we've been able to ensure that we have the same read access that we previously had, but we've managed to curtail costs by our South African research has flipped, even if the journals haven't flipped, and even if other countries aren't doing it. We're doing that without surrendering a copyright, without having author-facing charges. So we're saving on those APCs in the wild. Our research is more visible, and the money that we were spending on paying to read is reducing. However, this system is definitely not perfect. It has its problems. There isn't time to go into all of them right now. And we continue to look at ways of transitioning towards open access. And stress the need to plan and adapt together based on the evidence. So that's it from me, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Glenn. Very, very interesting, and quite a few points coming up, I think. Yeah, thank you for that. I think our next speaker really reflects a change in the list of stakeholders that we have in this. So Reggie, if you're ready to begin, that would be really great. Thanks. Thank you. Hi, Reggie. I don't know if we can see your presentation, but I don't think we can hear you if you have started speaking.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Reggie. Yes, we can now. Your camera isn't on, but we can hear you and see your presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Andrew. This presentation, okay, sorry, I'm not gonna worry about the camera. This presentation is developed around 3 core questions. The first question is, does the current publishing ecosystem uphold Africa's right to access and to disseminate? And I think this is a critical concept, to disseminate information as per the 1947 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The dominant discourse now is on the global South, mimicking the European conceptualized transformative agreements. Hence, the second question, how does Diamond Open Access model compare with transformative agreements in advancing equitable access and dissemination of African scholarship? The third question relates to the role of the academic library. How can an African academic library promote inclusivity and equity in publishing to serve as agents of epistemic justice? I'm hoping that my submission will present a view on how ownership of African scholarship can be changed. It can be changed through an alternative publishing ecosystem. In this ecosystem, the academy takes back its scholarship and, in the process, promotes inclusivity and equity. It is critically important to debunk. We need to debunk the association of poor quality and predatory publishing with African scholarship. There is a desperate need to remove this sort of Damocles which threatens the growth of African scholarship. In terms of the first question, at the heart of this issue lies the question on who owns African scholarship. Ownership determines control over processes, influences leadership commitment, and defines stakeholder roles in knowledge creation and dissemination. Yet, dissemination is dominated by external systems shaping all other components. African researchers face systemic barriers to the dissemination of their scholarship. The open access movement initially emerged as a philanthropic movement to promote equity and advance the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. However, the proliferation of author-facing fees through article processing charges has reproduced the exclusions open access sought to eliminate. Many African scholars cannot afford these fees and must request exemptions. These exemptions are basically entrenching dependency and inequality. Geographic, language, editorial, and peer review bias within the current commercial publishing ecosystem continues. It continues to demarginalize African voices, contradicting both the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Budapest Open Access Initiative, which calls for equitable and bi-directional sharing of knowledge. In response to the financial barriers, many African scholars published in closed journals. Ironically, this output is unaffordable to the very institution that had funded those research outputs. Africa continues to force fit into systems that do not serve their realities, leading to the next question. And that is the issue of diamond open access versus transformative agreements. The global publishing landscape is shifting. Plan S, one of the leading architects of transformative agreements, and they were advocating for transformative agreements to achieve immediate, unrestricted access to publicly funded research. However, Plan S has now conceded that transformative agreements are unsustainable, and they have now turned to diamond open access, a model that has flourished in Latin America. Diamond open access, if you're looking at my screen, on the left-hand side, looks at no fees for the authors or the readers, basically removing the financial barriers and ensuring research is freely available to all. This benefits all institutions, including those that are lacking resources to engage in the publishing process. Local ownership and control. Diamond Open Access empowers African universities, libraries, and scholars to manage publishing processes, curating research that reflects local priorities and epistemologies. We're looking at equity and inclusion. At the epicenter of Diamond is inclusivity. Then we're looking at the right-hand side, and we're looking at subscriptions, transformative agreements. These are subscription-based. Transformative agreements evolve from subscription models where institutions continue paying publishers for the right to publish open access. This sustains high costs and limits participation for under-resourced institutions. Then there's the issue of unequal benefits. Transformative agreements advantage well-funded universities while marginalizing smaller institutions, again, contradicting the principles of equity. And then we have, lastly, looking at restricted access. Negotiated with commercial publishers, transformative agreements reinforces dependency and weaken local control of over African scholarship. This gives rise to another question. Why are we still chasing the ghost of transformative agreements, even when the architects of transformative agreements have moved on? Diamond Open Access offers a genuinely transformative and sustainable path, one that prioritizes local ownership, financial inclusivity, and contextual relevance. By embracing Diamond Open Access, African institutions can reclaim the scholarship, dismantle structural inequalities in global publishing, and ensure that knowledge remains a shared public good. And then we go at the last question, that is the role of the academic libraries, agents of epistemic justice. Academic libraries occupy a strategic position in transforming Africa's publishing landscape. The African Platform for Open Scholarship, one of many examples which demonstrate how libraries can move beyond their traditional role of being repositories to becoming active enablers of equitable, community-driven publishing. The platform provides both infrastructure and philosophical frameworks to advance diamond open access and promote social justice in knowledge production. We're looking at reclaiming ownership and agency. Academic libraries can use this particular platform and other platforms to host and manage diamond open access journals, monographs, and proceedings governed locally and aligned with African priorities. This shifts control from commercial publishers to African institutions, advancing epistemic justice and by ensuring that knowledge is not filtered. It is not filtered through external gatekeepers. We're looking at building sustainable and inclusive infrastructure. APOS provides shared open source infrastructure supported by regional and continental partnerships. By participating, libraries reduce duplication, pool resources, and ensure technical sustainability. This collective model promotes social justice by enabling even under-resourced institutions to participate fully in knowledge production and dissemination. And lastly, in terms of this particular process, we're looking at fostering equity in knowledge access and dissemination. Through APOS, libraries guarantee free access to the readers and no publication costs for the authors, removing economic barriers that perpetuate inequality in scholarly communication. And this aligns with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which recognizes the right to freely share and access knowledge. Libraries thus serve as agents of redistribution, as agents to disseminate, ensuring that knowledge serves the public good rather than private profit. To conclude, the current publishing ecosystem does not uphold Africa's right to access, and I think the critical component, and disseminate knowledge equitably. To reclaim control and fulfill the promise of universal knowledge sharing, Africa must embrace diamond open access through initiatives like the African Platform for Open Scholarship, which is anchored in ownership, inclusivity, and justice. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Reggie. Thank you very much for taking us through that. I'd like to just note, thank you. You've all put in a few comments. You've put in comments and some questions in the chat. I'm trying to keep track of the questions, and thanks for the comments. And thank you for the comments of that on those, and we'll bring those up in the discussion. I see a note here from Janet asking at the end of the session, I should announce you to register for the session tomorrow, which is on between 11 and 12:30. So I'll hopefully remember to do that at the end of the session, but please do so if you haven't already. Thank you. So to move on to the last speaker today, Nicholas, who's based in Sweden, is also a library perspective and has I think they have a sort of longer term engagement with open access and these funding models, and it'd be really interesting to hear about what you've been doing at that end. Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and also thank you, Glenn, for inviting me to this webinar. I'm very honored to be part of it, and I'm also very glad to the post presentations. We have very much in common, Sweden and South Africa, in terms of our issues with transformative agreements. I hope you can see my presentation now. I will talk about very shortly about how Sweden is charting a path beyond transformative agreements and our new policy, how to deal with transformative agreements on a consortial level. Of course, I need to introduce myself also. My name is Niklas Wilén, and I work as a license manager at the National Library of Sweden. You can see the building in my background here, but I'm not at the office at the moment. I have a background in university library, but my days are mostly spent on negotiating with publishers. So the BIBSAM Consortium, it covers the whole of Sweden. We are about 1/5 of the size of South Africa, so we're a quite small country. But we have 96 members in total in the BIBSAM Consortium. Most of those are government institutions, but the big spenders and the stakeholders are academic institutions and universities. We negotiate around 60 agreements in total, which of 30 has publishing included in them. So those are transformative agreements. We have a yearly turnover of 60 million euros, which makes up almost 70% of the total expenditure for scientific publishing in Sweden. And within our agreements, we cover the APCs. We publish 16,500 open access articles yearly within our agreements that are covered by the agreement, so the researchers don't have to pay the APCs themselves. And we work from the National Library, and the National Library of Sweden has a government directive to promote and coordinate the work of open access in Sweden. But we are governed on the strategic level by the BIBSAM Consortium Steering Committee, which is appointed by the Swedish Rectors Conference. And they have 8 members in total. And just to give you a brief overview of how we are organized, we have the Swedish government that gives directive to the National Library, and they provide staff, and that's where I come in. I work at the Research Collaboration Unit. But the 96 participating institutions, they are represented in the Rectors Conference as well as the Steering Committee, and they make the strategic decisions for us, and they opt into our agreement. So they are there on a voluntary basis, and they pay for the agreements with their library budgets. So that's where the money comes from. And we have adopted open access policies quite early in Sweden, and we've included publishing in all our major agreements, which has enabled us to come up to a quite high share of open access, especially in hybrid journals. So we are at the top. This is Sweden, and those gray lines are the other countries of the world. But in total, the publishing output in Sweden in total, about 85% is open access at the moment. And just as Glenn pointed out earlier, by introducing transformative agreements, we've been able to switch from closed articles to open access articles and have to speed up the process. And that has been very beneficial. But we see the transformative agreement life cycle as we started out with reading only agreements, which all of them has now become read and publish, and they have then become something we called publishing as a service. So read only has read only, and read and publish has publishing, of course. But publishing as a service is where we ideally don't pay more for the agreement than we would have if we paid for the APCs on list price. So the agreement should not be worth we shouldn't pay more for the agreements than it would have costed to just publish at list price. And we adopted a kind of an up or out policy. So if an agreement cannot meet our requirements on those days, we cancel the agreement. And we've done that with the Elsevier agreement a few years back when they weren't able to present a feasible read and publish agreement for us. We were without an Elsevier agreement for a year and a half. But our goal is also, when transformative agreements, they actually mean that they're supposed to transform from closed journals to hybrid journals to open access journals, and then transform into fully open access publishing agreements. We're still waiting for publishers to actually do that, but there are some publishers that are well on their way. We do also have agreements with fully open access publishers as well. And I'm going to use a kind of graph that Glenn has been using. I'm so glad that you're using Flourish graphs, because these are great. So we have transformative agreements now with Read and Publish, with Elsevier, Springer Nature, Wiley, Taylor and Francis, and so on, all the big commercial publishers. We also do, and you can see those in blue, we have Gold Open Access Agreement for Frontiers and PLOS, where the Swedish research funders go in and cover the cost for the agreements to have unlimited publishing for all Swedish authors. So the libraries don't have to pay for that anymore. So it's a great success, but it still costs a lot, and it's not enough. Because when we look at the number of gold and hybrid journals that we publish within our agreements, we see that, of course, gold is on the rise, and that's a good sign. But on the other hand, the hybrid journals are flattening out and even increasing. We were hoping that the publishers actually were going to transform their journals from hybrid to gold open access journals, and that the number of hybrid articles were to drop. And as you've seen from the JISC report that came out a few years ago, the forecast where the hybrid journals are not going to transform, and I think it's 70 years from now, they're going to be fully transformed at this pace. And the commercial publishers, the big ones, they've seen this as a very good business idea to sell hybrid, to sell open access in hybrid journals, as well as charging for read access. And I meet with Glenn and other consortial colleagues around the world on a monthly basis. And I haven't seen any big commercial publishers that are actually decreasing their subscription prices based on how much open access saturation they have in their hybrid journals. So they're charging us for both open access and reading, and that's not good. So the Swedish Rectors Conference made recommendations to the BIBSAM Consortium Steering Committee, and we have adapted a new action plan based on those recommendations. And these are too long to explain in this format, but the new action plan that was adopted by the BIBSAM Consortium last year is that the consortium should not sign agreements for reading and publishing in so-called hybrid journals, and instead only negotiate for publication in open access journals. And this approach should be implemented from 2026 and applied to all open journals, regardless of publisher. So that's a quite a bold statement and a bold action plan. And this essentially means that we are going to not renew any hybrid agreements. And why is this? I mean, we see that we are stuck in the transformative environment, and the only way out is to not sign those anymore. And this will have consequences, of course. We have, as I mentioned, we have 10,000 hybrid articles published every year that is covered by our agreements. The researchers now will have that funding withdrawn, and of course they will still be able to publish in hybrid journals if they want, but we hope that they will go to gold and diamond alternatives that we are supplying, either diamond initiatives that are done on European level or Swedish level, or go to alternative gold open access journals, or even publish with rights retention, which means that they can parallel publish directly. We don't have that in place in Sweden just yet. The library perspective of this is that we're going to lose the closed read access, and that's going to be an interesting challenge, how to replace closed read access with, for example, interlibrary loans or even post-termination access, and that means that we have access to the volumes that we subscribed to earlier years, or if the libraries should sign or not sign local agreements. So next up for Sweden right now is that our current agreement will run until the end of term. So we are implementing this by 2026, and the affected output is going to be spread out over the years. And now we're doing communication with the institutions and our stakeholders, and we had a meeting yesterday with the Swedish Rectors Conference to reiterate the action plan and the consequences, and we have their support. It's important that we have the support from all of Sweden when we do this. I think I'm over my time, but these presentations will be shared, and I have recommended reading regarding this, both articles and the action plan and the recommendations behind that. So if you want to go in further, that please do. And I say thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nicholas. Thank you very much for that. And thank you to all the speakers. I wonder if I enjoy your moment of applause. That's well deserved, all of you. I wonder if I could invite the speakers to turn their cameras on, please, if that would be possible, just so that everyone can see you. We have about 20 minutes, I think, before this comes to an end. So I thought we could just go through a few of the questions which appeared in the chat, as well as a few things that you wanted to raise. And then, as I said at the end, it would be great if just have a few last thoughts from you, summarizing what you think some of the key things, points of departure, or things that we need to pick up on for future discussions there. I wanted to kick off with a question that Tanya asked me to mention, which is, I'll just read this as it's appeared here. If those who fund research have their own interests, does government and or policymakers have mechanisms in place to keep those interests for research funding in check? I think this is a follow-on from the discussion that happened this morning, and I wondered if we could go perhaps in the order that you've spoken. So, Noktula, I'm not sure if you're still on the call. You might be.
Yes, I'm still here.
Hi, Noktula. Thanks. So something about the alignment of government policy and policy making around funding.
Yes, thank you. And this is why I was quick to touch on my presentation that although we've been working on the strategy with for our own open science, but it will be closely aligned to the DSTI. I think on the funding and what we fund is aligned, and I think on the open science policy, when it comes out and our strategy comes out, we'll see that it is strongly aligned together and also aligned to DSTI's policy on inclusion.
Okay, thank you, Noktula. I'm not sure if anyone else, Reggie, I don't know if you have a comment or.
Yeah, look, I think there are lots of ways in which government can re-engineer processes. For example, if you look at the reward system or the incentive, the subsidy system, if government can look at providing different tiers for publication, hypothetically, we say that those that are publishing Diamond Open Access, because there's no cost and it is a societal benefit, would get a much higher subsidy. Those that are publishing closed get no subsidy. That, in a way, will start to shift the thinking. Because as a researcher myself, one of the reasons you publish, besides the fact that you want your research read, is that you get research subsidy. And I think the questions have been coming through in terms of how DHET would do that. So if we start to realign those subsidy processes, you are then going to force researchers to think differently as to where they get published.
Yeah. I think one thing that I've got that's come out here is the necessity for structural, infrastructural interventions at a very, very high level. That was the first thing. The second thing that I think is just this understanding, I think, of publishing being one homogeneous thing. There are so many aspects, and you've each tapped into the various bits of it, which I as a publisher would kind of almost segment into departments. So there's the acquisition, the production of the content, the development of the product, the dissemination of it, and then the measure of use, whether that's in terms of revenue or in terms of traditional bibliometrics or whatever it is. I wonder if you have thoughts. I think, Nicholas, it'd be interesting to hear from you. Your presentation just said Swedish government, and as if it was one collective whole. But what I think what we're hinting at here is that there are slight disconnects between DST, Policy and Activity, DHET, which are the Department of Science and Department of Higher Education. I would involve something like the Department of Trade and Industry as well, where I think there are odds between these. I wondered if the four of you perhaps could take it in turns to just maybe say something about that, about aligning those processes, aligning those agencies. Yeah, I'll stop. Noktula, if you'd like to go first, and then perhaps Glenn. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I think a little bit on what Reggie first before I tackle this, and maybe let other colleagues tackle it. The noise has gone up. Sorry, I don't need to find different space. Sorry, just.
No problem.
Yeah. The fund, I think, yes, I think government has a role to play in aligning and supporting incentives. But I think also the universities have a role to focus on not just on prestige, but on impact, which will then force them to recognize Diamond and the local content. And I saw a question, for example, on the content that Glenn was producing, how much of it is produced by South African journals, just to begin those type of questions. So those questions are important. Let me stop there. Maybe let Nicholas, and then I can come in later.
Thank you, Noktula. Glenn, I wonder if you could. Thank you, Noktula.
Just repeat the question quickly, please. I think I got it.
The question for me was about these big structural interventions and restructurings that need to happen. But clearly there are slight disconnects at the highest levels between the departments. So the motivations of the DHET as opposed to the intentions of the DST and the activities of the DTI, for instance.
Yeah. I think that I really hope that the evidence is looked at, and I don't believe that there is a silver bullet. I think that we're going to have a mix of solutions, that will address the various different things that we need to do. But from my perspective, I see your research output as the last step of the research process. So one needs to factor that into the cost. And whilst I was listening very carefully to Niklaus, thinking hard about the similarities and the differences, Niklaus is from a country that hasn't lost 94% of their purchasing power over the last 40 years. So they may have choices that, to them, gold open access is attractive because it's affordable. Whereas, if we're going to look at diamond open access, how are we going to convert the 16,000 articles? Would our libraries have the capacity to process and publish that many articles? I can't see it happening. And I can't see all researchers choosing to publish in a different place to where their peers are publishing and where their peers hang out. So, I think that one is going to have to develop policies that go beyond the idea that you've arrived if you've produced a paper. I heard a very interesting talk about scholarly communication, saying, how do you demonstrate to politicians and the ordinary people in the street how your research can make the world a better place? It goes way beyond publishing a paper. Scholarly communication is about infusing that knowledge into real world situations. So it's going to be very complex, but there are immediate steps and examples. I mean, I know of researchers who choose to publish to co-author with Global North publishers because that's where they're going to get the subsidy, rather than their neighbors in Zimbabwe. I know of some examples that have been cited like that, and it just doesn't make sense.
Oh.
Sorry, I rambled.
Andrew, can I just comment on something that Glenn said, and that is, you cannot expect the libraries to be publishing the 13,000, as you said. Neither does the publisher. All the publisher does is disseminate which the academy has already developed. So I think the concept of publishing needs to be clarified. It's not as if the publisher is doing the publishing. They're only doing the dissemination. So that's I just wanted to make that point. The point that I want to also make in terms of your question, Andrew, is that unfortunately, there has to be a complete overhaul of the system. Let me give you a small example. A number of institutions have signed the Dollar Declaration. But how many of us actually practice that, because the NRF requirements are different? The institutional requirements are different. So they're all contradicting each other. So it can't be
Reggie.
a kind of piecemeal fix. It has to be an overhaul of the system.
Okay, thank you, Reggie. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to give Nicholas a chance to just explain something there as well. But I think that's probably one of the points. It's just this coordination at a state level between these departments, and some intervention that should come from this forum. Nicholas, I wonder if you could very briefly just say, I mean, do you face this issue as well? And if so, have you dealt with it, and how have you dealt with it?
Well, on the governmental level, it's I think they hold an arm's length distance from the universities, but the message from the government is that all the research that is funded by taxpayers' money must be openly available. And then they've left us to figure out how to do that. And traditionally, we moved into open access agreements, but the funds haven't been allocated to do that. So the libraries had to take that cost. And of course, the researchers are happy to have their APCs covered when they are obligated to publish open access. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that swift transformation. But now we see that we are stuck in those agreements, and that's where the complete overhaul is taking part. We're just canceling the hybrid agreements, and we hope to take that money to invest in Diamond Open Access and take back the initiative and take back our publishing and the control of publishing to the universities and to the researchers.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I think that leads very nicely to from the one point that Nokuthula made about prestige. And this idea of the hi Nokuthula, you have your hand up. Would you like to come in?
No, sorry. I'm gonna wait for you to finish so you can recognize.
I was just going to ask the lead on to the next question, which apart from having, and I want to kind of bring this back to the funding model idea, funding models idea. I'm of the opinion that there is no panacea, so there isn't something that is just going to fix everything. And I think it's useful to know what the applications are in various places. There are very specific things here. We're not entirely unique, but there isn't going to be one solution. And that solution also isn't going to stick forever. And I think what we need to consider is a responsiveness to changes. We've seen it before with gold, with bronze and green, all of that stuff, all the colors. And eventually now we have a workable model which might be sustainable for a while, which might apply in certain contexts. Fundamentally, or underneath all of this that poses a problem for me is something like interinstitutional competition, which I think usually works against the national interest. If we're talking about us and we, then I'm not sure who we and us are. And I think if we do a very quick survey of who's in this room and on this call, we're probably going to see more people from WITS, where I am, and UCT, where Reggie is, than we are from Fort Hare and from the University of Zululand. And I think that equitableness, that needs to really be threshed out. So that's perhaps a challenge, and I'd like to throw that out. We could ask your comments on it, but I also think that could be the next sort of point really for us to take forward, was to address this interinstitutional competition and to actually begin to consolidate a position with the flexibility and responsiveness that includes everybody on that. Yeah. Don't know if any of you, sorry, Nokuthula, Glenn, Reggie, Nicholas, just coordinating institutional activities. Glenn, hi.
Yes, and oh, okay.
Go ahead, Knox. Go ahead.
Sorry, Nokuthula, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew and Glenn, for giving me the space. I think we just need to think a little bit, especially on this webinar. We are asking ourselves who owns the knowledge, and currently, either government or funder or university really technically own the knowledge. And why is that? And I think a little bit what Glenn said, that researchers will publish where their friends hang out. So the question is, why do we do research? Which is then what we're trying to align with the STI and that we are doing research for impact to society. So how can we achieve that? So yes, I think, Andrew, you are right. I think the publishing models, even Diamond and repository, may change a little bit, and I hope they change. I will go back to one of my comments I made, that I don't think we really need to think the article is the last communication and the only way to communicate science, because we are only communicating to our peers, not to society. So how do we address that change, the holistic change in the system? I think the real aspiration and the last thing that we should aim for is collapsing how the whole knowledge communication system is set up. It's not set up for society. That is why it takes long to publish. That's why it requires so many role players. But 90% of what we're publishing should be simplified in local languages to the stakeholders that the research is aimed for. And then some of this question, I think what we are discussing now, especially for the Global South, we are still boxing ourselves in only article, and even worse, not thinking about the digital space that we are in. We are still thinking of publication as a printing press. A little bit, I'll stop there and hand over to our.
Thank you, Nokuthula. I just noticed, sorry, Glenn, you can have a go next, but I do notice that we've got 4 minutes left. So perhaps if you want to respond to that question, and also any final thoughts on that.
Just very quickly, I listened to a TED Talk earlier this week by a very rich CEO who was arguing what was wrong with the trickle-down economy system that, that Trump is punting, which only benefits the really wealthy. And at the end of his talk, someone said, "Well, why don't you give all your money away?" And he said, I've created more wealth for more people by lobbying for the right laws to make sure that there's the appropriate minimum wage in place so that those people can afford to buy things that stimulate the economy far more than the money I could have given away. And what really struck me with that is that if you look at the evidence and you think very strategically and carefully about what it is you want to achieve, the government can structure its funding and its policies to steer the research system in the right direction, which will hopefully address these objectives that UNESCO so nicely summarized.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. Nicholas, would you like to just come in with my question was about institutional collaboration and alignment in order to influence government?
Well, we have like the overhaul we're doing in Sweden at the moment. We rely on the institutions to align, especially at the rectors' conference level, where we have the vice chancellors and the library directors all aligned with our new objective to move away from transformative agreement. So we are working with that, but that is a challenge because in some cases I believe that the vice chancellors are not really. Sometimes they might not really understand the real consequences of our action plan, so we really need to communicate that to them. But on a government level, we are still arm's lengths away from them in terms of this action plan, at least. So that's a good thing.
Okay, so still work to do, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to hear. I mean, I hope you fix it, but it's good to know that it's not just us. Reggie, do you have any thoughts about the institutional collaboration?
I think if we have a solution to that, we don't have to meet next year. That's for sure, because we have a lot of pseudo collaboration. All of us, all African American institutions aligned to addressing the SDGs and the National Development Plan. But where things come apart is what you've actually said, the competitive nature of this. And I think if we can address the competitive nature, then all solutions get resolved. So I don't think there is a solution. We just need to try and work towards what works best for the different combinations, for one of the better concept.
Thank you, Reggie. Thanks. Thank you, all of you. I see we're on the time that we're supposed to end. I just want to suggest that the three things, or the two things really that I got, I may have missed something else, was just a greater coordination with policy and in implementation to deal with state. To deal with the different departments of state that are affected by this, or that will influence this, to help influence a more coherent policy with that, and then to look at this issue of institutional cooperation rather than competition to a greater level. I also wanted to just throw in two things, which is from my perspective, both as a publisher and as someone involved in this, is the conversation's largely been about journals. There are also a little thing which exists for a while called books, quite an important part of the output that we produce. There's also a focus, I think, that we need to have on developing humanities and social sciences, not only the STM. These may be differentiated offerings. We need to factor these things in. And something that Glenn said was just in the comments about invigorating or supporting or developing mechanisms to truly develop our own local publishing. This has been a solution that I've suggested and advocated for a while. And I think there's something there. The lesson from China, for instance, who 11 years ago was not the largest producer of published work in the world, but with coordinated national and institutional activity, that's possible to do. I'd like to thank all of you very much for speaking. Glenn, Nokuthula, Nicholas, and Reggie, thank you very much. Really enjoyed speaking to you, and thank you all of you for attending. Janet, I don't know, Janet and Tanya, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add. Oh, please register everyone for tomorrow's session. That's what I was supposed to remember. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you very, very much, Andrew, and to the colleagues for a very engaging and robust discussion this afternoon. There are some critical points that have been raised that we will certainly include in our post-webinar reflection on how to take forward with the key stakeholders. Thank you so much. I don't know, Andrew, if there's anything you'd like to say in closing, or to kind of stress for us in terms of taking forward the discussion. But I want to just thank you and the presenters as well from USAF for your time and commitment to this event. So thank you. And Andrew, if there's anything further from your side?
Thank you, Janet. Nothing from my side, just the last 2 points that I think we should take forward, and perhaps we can pick that up into an action plan for in tomorrow's session.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much. And then we can adjourn today's session and look forward to seeing you all back again tomorrow. The registration link is on the USAF website. You will see a pop-up that comes on when you go to the USAF website, and the program is also there. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.